From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2301, this is Ham Nation Headlines for Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. We begin this week by marking a turning point in amateur radio history. The first transatlantic communications on the amateur portion of the spectrum 100 years ago this month. A video from the Antique Wireless Museum in New York celebrates the 1-century mark of what the museum is calling the Triumph of the Amateurs, which began with the first test on December 11th, 1921.
A dramatic video released recently by the Antique Wireless Museum tells how hams conceived of a historic test in 1921 that showed the world that the shortwave spectrum below 200 meters was anything but useless when it came to sending messages across the ocean. This was the now famous transatlantic test project. In a 1-hour video, Ed Gable, K2MP, and Mark Ertl, AE2A, tell how the amateur spirit of experimentation put ham radio station 1BCG on the air with a tube-based transmitter on 1.3 megahertz. The CW transmission from Connecticut by the Radio Club of America was successfully copied in Scotland. As hams prepare to reenact that day on its anniversary using a replica of the original transmitter, hams everywhere can learn all about the moments that made history on 160 meters. Find a link to the YouTube video in the text version of this week's newscast on our website, arnewsline.org. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Jack Parker, W8ISH.
Who doesn't love the thought of a better, more powerful transmitter? You don't even have to be a ham. In the UK, an upgrade has been made at Radio Caroline, a once notorious pirate radio station, leaving the station feeling loud and proud.
If you can hear the new high-powered signal of Radio Caroline on 648 kHz AM, you can thank its new 25 kilowatt transmitter, a Harris DX25U, which is a nice step up from the station's older 10 kilowatt Nortel model. The station manager Peter Moore writes on the Southgate Amateur Radio News website that the station is keen to know how much further its signals are reaching these days. He asks for reception reports to be sent to help the crew achieve even more improvements. You can find a link to the reception report at radiocaroline.co.uk. Peter said, quote, "Now the new transmitter is in service, covering a much larger area than before, we hope to reconnect with more of our listeners from the past," end quote. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Jeremy Boot, G4NJH.
All hams know that public service is a big part of what we do, but it isn't always done holding a radio.
When the Great Cycle Challenge rolled out in October to raise funds to find cures for childhood cancers, the Bendigo Amateur Radio and Electronics Club was ready for this month-long bicycle-based event. This time, however, members weren't stationed along any particular route, as hams often are during one-day events. They were on the road themselves throughout the month, pedalling more than 600 kilometres towards their financial destination. The club reports that the Barrick Pedal Radio Group's efforts helped raise nearly 1,400 Australian dollars for the cause, adding their total to the national fundraising total, more than $6.9 million. Of course, that's not to say there wasn't some kind of radio involved. Barrick Pedal Group member Graham Knight, VK3GRK, said afterward in a press release, and I quote, "Some of our radio club members enjoy bike riding, and some of us even use radios to keep in touch with others whilst out riding." End quote. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Graham Kemp, VK4BB.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at arnewsline.org. With Jack Parker, W8ISH, Jeremy Boot, G4NJH, Graham Kemp, VK4BB, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe, I'm Don Wilbanks, AE5DW. 7-3. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation.